to Saturday Night at the Movies, the podcast that celebrates classic, cult, and current films and television and the people that made them, and many other aspects of pop culture. I'm your host, Steve Rubin. Our producer's Ben Shrewsbury, and our signature theme was composed by Greg Leroff. Here it's always Saturday night, and our mission is to chronicle film and pop cultural history one memory at a time. Tonight, we are delighted to welcome author Brian Levant, who is also a feature film director, producer, and writer, and Fred Fox Jr., a television producer, writer, and author, who's the former story editor, supervising producer, and writer of 29 episodes of the legendary Happy Days television series, and the co-author with Brian of 50 Years of Happy Days, a visual history of an American television classic. And I must tell you that Brian is also a former showrunner on Happy Days, a writer on Happy Days, a producer on Happy Days. These guys are all very happy, and we're going to be very happy tonight. Welcome, Fred and Brian.
Thank you so
Welcome.
much. It'd be great to be here.
It's
At our age, it's great to be anywhere. All right.
you know, I remember vividly the 70s. I just graduated college, and Happy Days was such a breath of fresh air. I got to tell you that I was always into nostalgia. I loved the 50s when George Lucas did American Graffiti. The whole concept of cruising was just something so interesting. I think in LA it was the end of the cruising era. Nobody was cruising Sunset anymore. But on Happy Days, there was kind of a feeling that the world was okay. Do you think Happy Days would work today?
Oh,
Absolutely not.
absolutely. Even almost even more so what's going on today.
You mentioned American Graffiti. Happy Days began before American Graffiti. The original pilot, New Family in Town, was its original title. And Gary Marshall wrote a beautiful script, and Ron Howard was the star. Marion Ross was in it. Anson Williams made his series debut in it, and it did not sell. They played it off as in the last episode of Love American Style to try and get back some of their money. But this is what Fred Roos, the casting director of American Graffiti, who also had a management company with Gary Marshall, the writer and executive producer of what was then called The Happy Days.
Well, let me interrupt you just for a second because I read something that threw me a real curveball. Was it true that Michael Eisner, of all people, was stuck in an airport somewhere and they had something to do with the beginning of this?
Yes, it's
Yes.
actually where we opened the book during a snowstorm in Newark, New Jersey. Tom Miller, who was a top development executive at Paramount, and Michael Eisner were on the same plane going back to LA, and they started talking about the kind of TV shows that they missed, the family shows, and they particularly were hung up on Mama, the television adaptation of George Stevens' I Remember Mama, about a Norwegian immigrant family in San Francisco in the 30s, as told through the eyes of their writer teenage daughter. So Gary Marshall said, I don't know how to write for guys named Lars and Nels. And they took Tom Miller's hometown of Milwaukee and located their pilot about and translated the time era to the 50s when they had grown up.
Now,
And
is Miller the same?
Tom Miller.
Is Miller the same as Miller Milkus?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. And Eddie Milkus was the head of production at Paramount. And so that is the pilot that Fred Roos showed to George Lucas to get him interested in Ron Howard for American Graffiti.
Right, terrific. Now, Fred, you are a second generation comedy writer, or are you, does it go back further than that?
Actually,
his father was born in 1915. How much further can you go?
well, yeah, thanks for asking. Dad was a very successful comedy writer. Bob Hope, Lucille Ball, Red
I mean, he
Skelton.
has like 75 Bob Hope credits. I mean, he must have been welded to
Well,
Hope. To hip.
but it wasn't just Bob Hope. Fred Fox Sr. wrote for so many series I watched when I was growing up. Mona McCluskey. I think he did 18 episodes of that series about a movie star married to a soldier. He did Dobie Gillis. He did, I saw his name once on What's Happening.
And I mean, Brian's amazing. Brian knew of Dad before we even met. I mean, it was, and I tell this story a lot, but growing up, I thought it was so neat. Dad was a writer. All my friends would want to come over, and he'd crack them up. Never entered my mind I would be a writer. It just stupidly. And now, of course, I look back and said, when I graduated from college, I could have gone to Dad and said, Dad, could you get me a meeting or tell me about this stuff? And it was
an
just
agent,
an agent or something. But
Well, it's interesting. I mean, having that connection is incredible. I had no connections whatsoever. The closest I ever got is I grew up in West LA. I was living on Lapeer near Pico and Robertson, and
sure.
my neighbor was Ed Simmons.
Oh,
Ed
wow.
Simmons, a baseball player.
No,
No, it's
no, comedy writer.
Oh, really?
Carol
I don't know
Burnett,
it.
right?
Carol
Ah,
Burnett.
yes, he was the head writer. Okay, good.
Exactly. But I was about as far away from writing anything in my life. I think that, but I certainly respect people who have connections. What about you, Brian? Did you have any connection to anybody in the business before you started?
Are you kidding? No. But our friend Cindy Beagle, who we quote in one chapter in the book, says everybody knows someone. And that's the lifeline that people use to enter the business. Here's how I got my agent, William Morris Agency. In my grandmother's apartment building was a woman named Gert Hess. Actually, I think her brother or something used to own the New York Jets. But her nephew ran William Morris in New York.
Oh.
And I sent my first spec script. She got it to her nephew, who sent it to the head of TV in Los Angeles, Larry Orbach, and they called me in and he'd ask an agent to read it, and the guy responded positively and they signed me. I was 22.
How exciting. That's very exciting.
Yeah, well, it wasn't an accident. It's so funny to me that Fred didn't consider what he was so built for naturally. I mean, that Fred, and I'll brag for you, Fred, just made his 13th All-Star game in a row in the 55 and over league, having graduated high school in 65. You do the math. But it shows a great team player. And Fred was always such a tremendous asset to every show that he was on, especially Happy Days, especially the new Leave It to Beaver we worked on, My Secret Identity that we had created together, and he ran and won the International Emmy for Best Children and Young People Show in 1989, and on to Family Matters. And it's a great skill that he brought to everything he worked on.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, Fred, where did you get your break? What was obviously you had a terrific dad in the business, but where did you get your break?
Oh, excellent. Thanks for asking. But before that, Brian, his heart, we worked together on Happy Days. We were super, showrunners. And then when he brought back Leave It to Beaver, he included me. So this is great. And then Secret Identity was fun. But anyway, to answer your question, New Year's Eve, 1975, I'm starting to leave for a party. I thought, well, I'll answer the phone. It was Cindy Williams calling. Cindy and I went to high school together, along with Sally Field, Mike Ovitz, Bob Finkelstein, and others. So Cindy said,
Leland Sklar, the noted bassist, hundreds of albums you've heard.
Just an amazing group. So Cindy said, now, Fred, I'm doing the show called Laverne and Shirley. I don't know, it could be a bomb, but if you'd be interested in being my gopher assistant, I'll get you a meeting with Gary Marshall. And I was working for a small advertising agency at the time, so I was thrilled. So got me the meeting with Gary. I walked into Gary Marshall's office. He said, "So you must be Freddie Fox's kid." And then I knew that when Gary and Jerry Belson came out from New York to be writers, one of their first gigs was the Joey Bishop show. My father was there, and Gary said that Dad was so very nice and encouraging. And then Gary said, "Now I know you want to write," and I almost went, "Oh, really?" But he said, "Oh, right now we just, if Cindy needs her dry cleaning picked up or a car wash, um, we just want her to be very happy on the set." So that's how I started out. And so I take her car to get washed. But when she left for the day, I was very lucky, and I would go to the writer's room and started there. And I just such a lucky break because I ended up writing a episode of Laverne and Shirley that Ron Howard and Anson Williams guest starred, and very lucky. Did very well. And then a little bit later, Gary asked me if I wanted to go to Happy Days, and I was thrilled, but I thought, gosh, would it be fair to Cindy? Because Cindy was there pretty much alone, and there was, Gary Marshall, Penny Marshall, Ronnie Marshall, and Gary
Tony Marshall.
and Tony Marshall.
So
So,
let me get my chronology correct. Happy Days goes on the air and then begats Laverne and Shirley as a spin-off, correct?
It's the
right,
third season after facing, Happy Days began as a one camera show,
Right.
a single camera show, and they did a full second season, and I think it was 18 episodes in their first seasons, beginning in January 15th, 1974, and they were almost canceled at the end of the second season for low ratings, and they were saved by changing the show from a single camera show, the show that you were describing, the cruising, the nostalgia, the thickness of the era, to a show shot in front of an audience, which took advantage of the tremendous the tremendous acting potential of this group. It was unleashed. Their personalities and their energy just shone as they became a three-camera show. And in the middle of the third season, they did an episode, Lowell Gans and Mark Rothman, who were producing Happy Days, the third season. They wrote a show about they wanted Richie to get a sure thing, and so Fonzie sets them up. Him and her, they go on. Richie and Fonzie go on a double date with two bottle cappers from the Schatz Brewery who don't know the meaning of the word no. And the show is such an incredible success that 2 weeks later, they shot a presentation in the Cunningham's kitchen between Cindy and Penny. And
by the way, they were the two bottle cappers, right?
right,
exactly. And remember, Cindy had been with Ron and American Graffiti, and Penny Marshall had lost her job on the Paul Sands show. So Gary is always looking to get family work. So this incredible conflagration of energy and talent. They shot this presentation, and I think it's 110 days or something after they shot the Laverne and Shirley episode. It debuted as not only as the #1 show on television, but ABC's highest debut ever. And the two shows together were a massive powerhouse, which turned ABC, along with like Charlie's Angels, upset the whole balance of television by becoming the #1 network after CBS had been the #1 network for 33 years or something. And it changed the game, literally. And it opened up opportunities for everyone involved and guaranteed the people who worked there a long and on Happy Days, a happy run, and on Laverne and Shirley, kind of like the Ukraine war.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the motivation to do a book. Now, seems like a natural idea. How long was this book in gestation for you guys?
Well, go on, Fred. Go on.
It was funny. Brian and I were talking one day, and we realized there, Happy Days is focused on a lot of books, but there'd never been a single book on Happy Days. So fortunately, Brian called and said, we talked about this. He said, "Hey, what do you think?" And we did it, and then take it from there, Brian.
Well, we took an unusual step in the publishing business. We created a 116-page proposal, basically a thinned out version of the book to show what it could be, to show that it was visual, to tell this incredible story about these talented people who dominated American comedy for the most part for 40 years. And we found an audience of publishers who were interested, and we finally settled with Insight Editions, who specializes in pop culture works, and we were successful in licensing the rights from Paramount, becoming the first authorized Happy Days book of all time,
Now,
and basically the only one.
how tough was that to secure those rights? I know that studios and networks are always very difficult to deal with when you're asking not only for the rights to do something, but all the images, which of course are critical to a book
Right.
like yours. How
Well,
tough?
that's an excellent question, Brian.
Ooh. Paramount, we I think they only granted the rights to us because of our involvement with the show and the fact that we were not looking to do a slam job, exploit any conflicts that may have arisen behind the scenes. We wanted to tell a very honest story of the history of the show, which is complex and interesting and entertaining. Happy Days rose from the ashes of the second season to become the number one show in television, to to nurture 8 spin-offs, including not only Laverne but Mork and Mindy, which was also debuted as a number one show, and like in its first season, tied Happy Days uh, as the number 3 show in television. And launched Robin Williams' career. I mean, everybody who worked on Happy Days, when we were very proud to do bookends. Our book covers season by season, but it's bookended by what it happened in everybody's lives to bring them to Happy Days. And then after the show, we track them, and the people involved in Happy Days have been almost without exception so incredibly successful in dominating television in screen comedy. And Gary Marshall left the show basically day-to-day operations in the 5th season to become a feature director, and will go on to do Pretty Woman and Beaches and New Year's Eve and Mother's Day. I mean, 22 features grossing billions of dollars, and utilizing so many people. Ron Howard, an Oscar winner, has made, I believe it's up to like 46 films, plus like 6 documentaries now. He's going to make more films than Hitchcock.
Let me stop you for a second. Let's talk a
Sure.
little bit about Ron Howard, because Ron Howard,
Why not?
Ron Howard, beloved from the Andy Griffith Show all those years, Little Ron Howard. What is the story between Little Ron Howard up to Happy Days? Because I'm not clear what he was doing for that period. Was he present, or did he take a hiatus, or
No, Ron never stopped working. If you look, he was, for instance, when Apollo 13 had its tragic voyage, which he would make into an incredible movie, nominated for Best Picture and Best Director, he was shooting an episode of Gunsmoke in the desert. He was on MASH. He was in The Twilight Zone. He did a season and a half with Henry Fonda on The Smith Family. He was in B movies.
And Brian, I'd like to add that when Ron was doing Happy Days, he was just kind of like a sponge. He would go to the editing room after rehearsal. He would learn every aspect of the business, and he just had this passion. And as Brian and I have spoken about, since he was a little kid, he wanted to be a director. He took home movies and just just an incredibly talented and nice gentleman.
But the story of Ron Howard was how he had to battle his own image and his own face.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you looked at Opie, and you didn't even Opie as a 20-year-old, and you said, "Oh, that's not a director," but that was a director, and he made his first film in 1977. He shot it, Grand Theft Auto, that he directed and wrote with his father for Roger Corman. And in 25 years, he went from drive-in fare to the Best Picture Oscar and Best Director Oscar. It's an amazing route, but it was initially paved by the broad comedy films he directed, beginning with Night Shift, which starred Henry Winkler and Michael Keaton, and then to Splash with Tom Hanks. Now you look, and first of all, Ron learned a tremendous amount of comedy from Sheldon Leonard, from Andy Griffith, from Gary Marshall and Jerry Paris, the director of 242 out of 255 episodes, Emmy-winning director of the Dick Van Dyke Show and the Police Academy movies and everything. And so Ron took that knowledge, even though this wasn't his big broad comedy. Hard comedy was not how he was raised, but he learned this, and he took it to great advantage in his first films. And by the way, Splash, Tom Hanks, right? His second film after Bachelor Party, but has really transitioned his career.
Sure.
Started when Ron watched an episode of Happy Days that Tom Hanks did, that Fred and Rich Carell wrote. It was a great episode, bristling with energy, and it was fabulous, and it made such an impression on Ron that they initially wanted Tom Selleck. Universal wouldn't let Tom Selleck out to do Splash or Indiana Jones.
Right.
Tom Selleck had bad agents.
Now the impression,
but this is how that. But basically, it just shows you how things were intertwined on a lot.
The impression one gets, and when you evaluate the personalities of people in Hollywood, Ron Howard impresses me as just a good-natured guy with no airs to him whatsoever. Is that accurate?
No, it's totally accurate. The same with Henry. I mean, it
is. But I got to tell you something I read. Russell Crowe said, who did Beautiful Mind and the boxing movie with Ron. He said everybody thinks he's a simple bloke, but he's really the most intense director I've ever worked with.
Now, here's a question. Ron Howard obviously birthed in comedy, grows up in comedy, starts directing some major comedy features. How come Ron Howard doesn't direct comedy anymore?
That's a good question. He loves a challenge. 13 Lives, for instance, was shot in another country, in another language, half underwater,
by the way,
half underwater, by the way, he loves a challenge.
The riveting,
exactly.
riveting.
But he's looking for the challenge.
But this leads me.
See what we're going to say.
This leads me to another question, which is a bigger question, and we'll get back to Happy Days in a second.
Sure.
But comedy today, and as Fred and I have a mutual friend, Billy Reback. You know of Billy, Brian.
I know of him. I know he worked with my old writing partner, Brian Levant, for a while.
Yeah, Billy and I write together, and we lament the fact that every Friday we open the paper to see what's playing this weekend. They still list movies. They don't they have no ads for movies, but they list movies. No comedies. You go to the movies to see a movie in the theater, no trailer, no comedies to trailers. I mean, comedy, for the most part, seems to have disappeared from the multiplex. Everything is a franchise movie or an end-of-the-year depressing movie. What is going on?
Well, I could say you look at that Keke Palmer movie from Sony a couple months back, A Really Bad Day or whatever that was called. It was a monster hit. There's an audience there. They're waiting for it. I think, the industry, let's face it, the industry is cautious. The industry is tentative. And the beauty, no one recognizes how comedy floated the industry from the 20s on, and they should recognize it. And you're right, it's terrible. It's a dearth. And yeah, you
I mean,
don't
at the
you don't see
time,
it.
they often talk about the Great Depression, that the thing that kept people's spirit alive in the Great Depression were all the screwball comedies.
Right.
At a time when we're living through kind of a Great Depression on many
Well, we're
levels.
headed there, yes.
But no, that's why one of the reasons we wrote the book. It just Happy Days, as you mentioned earlier, I think would be a very needed and a big hit today.
Yeah, no, I mean, you look at when Happy Days debuted. It was in the middle of Nixon fighting to the release of the Watergate tapes.
Vietnam War.
Oil was. We were in the midst of what did they call that with Carter? The oil shortage or whatever it was. With the cars
Embargo.
lining up at gas stations for a
Right.
half a mile. Inflation was rampant.
Not to mention the end of the Vietnam War.
Exactly, but the country was divided, and Happy Days was a tonic. And hopefully something will rise.
Yes, no, that would be great. So
to take the place.
Let's talk a little bit about the performers. We talked a little bit about Ron Howard, of course, one of the sweetest, nicest guys ever. Let's talk. Let's mention the kind of the guy who is, and I'm looking for a nice photo. Excuse me for the people who can't see this. I'll just stick with the photo we have up right now. There's Henry Winkler. Let's talk about Henry. Henry Winkler is not a major character on the series to start. He's one of an ensemble. And then starting in the third season, they realized they had gold there. How did that come about?
Well, I think to start, when they're looking for an actor to play Fonzie. They're thinking of a big Italian brute, big strong kind of guy,
a bruiser.
A bruiser, exactly. So Henry walks into the audition, and just before he walked in, he thought some kind of a lightning bolt. He said, "I think I'm going to change my voice, kind of my attitude." So he kind of walks in, and he kind of points to the cast director. "Okay, hey you sit over there. You over there. Hey, nice hair." And just became
the character
and
exploded from him.
Right. So when he left the room, he just kind of tossed the script up in there, walked out, and Tom Miller said it was like another Pacino or something. It was
Pacino, Hoffman. He told Ron Howard,
right,
and how he took over the room.
Was he wearing the leather jacket when he walked in?
Hell no! I'm sure he was wearing a goddamn sweater.
As he often does.
Sweater guy. You're looking at 50 years of picture. He's wearing a sweater.
Well, I think that as you point out in your book, and as they point out in all the articles, that was there a more recognizable pop cultural figure in the 70s than Henry Winkler as the Fonz?
No, not even close.
No, the show was on top. They were cruising, and the lovely thing about the cast of Happy Days was that they wanted to repay for their success, and they launched into, for instance, the baseball team, which was so unique to Happy Days, and spent 10 years playing major league stadiums, USO tours from the South China Sea to the East-West, to the border of East Berlin, across country, east to west, east to like a big X across the country, and so many involvements in causes and supporting charities, and doing phenomenal work.
I actually read that Anson Williams' audition, Gary Marshall actually asked him if he was a good softball player. Is that?
Oh, it's a great story. He's at the audition, and he goes, there's a lead up to it, but he goes, the interview's going well, and Gary Marshall says, do you play baseball? And Nancy goes, yeah, yeah. And Gary Marshall goes, are you good? And Nancy says, oh yeah. And I think that was the clincher. He's hired,
Yeah,
right?
well, no, Anson said in the book, he says, in our interview with him, he said, I guess that was more important to him than my acting.
But it was funny. The team we had was incredible. When we went on USO tours, we played, the American troops and, a lot younger. And I think they thought, oh, these Hollywood, will just kill these guys. And we ended up winning most of the games. And we had some incredible athletes.
Well,
the teamwork that propelled the show on stage was evident and transferred to the baseball team.
you guys will laugh because the only time I ever got on the field at Dodger Stadium was Kiss Radio was playing the Happy Days team at Dodger Stadium.
Oh,
I volunteered myself to coach first base. That was I remember seeing some of the Happy Days gang in the locker room. It was fun. It was definitely.
Oh, you did a great job as coach. I remember.
Oh, yeah, I was magnificent.
Happy Days won, did they not?
I don't remember.
I'll promise you they won. Happy Days only lost in all these in the minor league parks, the charity games, and all the years I was there, 5 games. Two of them to the LA Lakers Kings team with Magic Johnson and Michael Cooper and Kurt Rambis.
The other one was the Miami Dolphins.
Well, no, that would have counted, but it was scuttled by rain before it became official.
Yeah, that's true.
It would have been 6.
Now, let me ask you a question about Robin Williams, because
Sure.
as you mentioned earlier, Mork and Mindy is a spinoff of the show. How did Robin Williams get into an episode of Happy Days? How did that happen?
Well, we're in the writers' room, and Gary came in. His son Scotty didn't watch Happy Days, so Gary said, "Well, what would make you watch Happy Days?" I said, "Well, gosh, it'd be really cool if like an alien or some space guy." And Gary says, "Yeah, come up with a story." Walks out of the room, and then we start pitching ideas.
The idea is, what the hell is that? We're going to do what his 8-year-old son wants to see. And this is the summer of Star Wars, mind you. So young minds were easily influenced. Poor Joe Glauberg.
So were you guys instrumental in writing that initial episode with
more? We avoided it like the plague.
What was interesting, I felt at the time, Brian was writing an episode where Fonzie and Richie first met. I was writing an episode where Fonzie falls in love with a ballerina. And Brian mentioned a gentleman named Joe Glauberg. And Joe had a saying, if something was wrong or he didn't want to do something, he goes, well, okay, I'll do it, but it'll be kind of painful. So Joe gets the assignment to write the episode. And there's a gentleman named Lee Margulies who worked for the LA Times for years, the calendar section. And so Joe writes the episode. And then in May at the time, these days, the networks would announce what shows were picked up, what pilots were picked up. So I asked Lee, what shows had ABC picked up? And he starts mentioning shows, and he goes, Mork and Mindy. And I'm thinking, Mork and Mindy, they didn't do a pilot for Mork and Mindy. And it turned out that Pam Dauber, who played a nun in a pilot that Gary and Bob Browner and Arthur Silver did, wasn't picked up. So Michael Eisner called Gary Marshall and said, hey, do you have anything? You have any shows? And he goes, well, I don't know. Let me think. So anyway, Gary put Pam Dauber from Sister Teresa and Robin, and all of a sudden there's a show.
They intercut. What happened? They took footage they did a split screen, and Pam Dauber never heard of Mork and Mindy till she read in Variety that it had sold. but Robin came in. Nobody wanted to play this part. Nobody wanted. We had the worst reading of all time on Happy Days. They did not want to do this show. They felt like we did when we heard the idea. What a stupid thing. And then in desperation, on Wednesday morning, the day of the run through, Ronnie Helen and Gary Manchera working the phones. This guy, Alan Eisman, says, "Oh, I got a client who does an alien as part of his act. Send him over." They read him.
But before that, an actor was hired and it was at the reading. And at the end of the day, he said, I don't want to do this, which is incredible.
Is it a name?
So we had nobody.
Is it a name actor, Fred, that you can mention?
There's so many people. Some people think it was Martin Mull. Some people think it was
No, it wasn't Martin Mull.
Right, one of the monkeys or something.
No, I can't remember. I can't remember his name. I think he was on Mel Brooks's show when things were rotten.
Yeah, yeah. He went on to do stuff. I don't really remember, but go ahead, Brian. I mean,
and so they're desperate, and Robin comes in, stays on script, remarkably, and they were impressed. They bring Jerry Paris in to read him. He doesn't even wait to get a contract. He takes him by the arm, brings him to stage 19. And this was Robin Williams sensed the opportunity. And he threw all of his impressive skills into this part. And the Happy Days cast, most shows, I would say 99% of series regulars would have said, "Get this asshole off our set."
Usually if a guest star, even changes a line, people go nuts. But yeah, go ahead, Brian.
But Robin was improvising well, and the Happy Days cast literally ceded the stage to him and became his second Bananas. And as Henry Winkler says in the book, my job was just not to laugh and stay out of the way.
How many episodes did Robin do?
One, and then sixth season, he came back and did an appearance in our anniversary show, the Clip Show, in which he said, "I'm paying back for my spinoffs."
Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I want to correct one of the great misconceptions in television history. I've been reading about it, and that is that Fred's episode, which, quote unquote, the jumping the shark episode, brought down the show and was the end of Happy Days. And that seems to be one of the great misconceptions. Fred, can you walk us through what that episode was?
Oh, sure. Lee Margis, who I mentioned, asked me to write an article for the LA Times, and God, I think it was 2010 or so. And I agree, it's one of the most misconceptions because after we did that episode, we did 164 more episodes. That was in 1978. We did 6 more years. So in that article, it's kind of known as In Defense of Jump the Shark. Because it didn't, and it got that expression. Some 3 students at I think University of Wisconsin were watching Nick at Night, and they're drinking beers, they're talking television. One of them says, "Hey, what was the moment when your favorite show started going downhill?" And one some said, "Oh, let's see, there's this Love Boat episode." Someone said, "There's a Flintstone," and the guy goes, "No, no, no, no. It was when Fonzie jumped the shark." There's like silence, and then I'm blanking on his name.
They saw something that was relatable, and it grew. It's in the Oxford Dictionary now.
I mean, the term "jumping the shark" is mentioned in all facets of life. I mean, and it seems like it was totally unfair. For the people who didn't watch that episode, Fred, can you explain how you got Fonzie on water skis? What was the plot of that show?
Well, the A story, a talent scout's car breaks down, goes into Arnold, sees Fonzie's magic with the ladies, and he goes, "Oh my God, this could be the next James Dean." Invites Fonzie to come out to Hollywood for a screen test, and of course the gang goes with him. It turns out the A story, Fonzie doesn't get the offer contract, but Richie does. So
inexplicably.
yeah, exactly. So in the B story, Fonzie's on the beach, runs into this cocky California kid, and they just don't get along at all. So they have a water skiing race. Amazingly, it's a tie, and we've we've told this story, but it's interesting. So there's a tie, so obviously we have to have a tiebreaker, and I'm so repetitive when we talk about this, but Brian and I can remember who wrote a joke, 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And we don't remember who came up with the tiebreaker. But, and then it just.
The tiebreaker was jump over the shark, which inexplicably was in a cage below water. And they moved the ramp, the water ski. But this whole thing could have been avoided. Henry Winkler's father, a lovely, sweet man, fled the Nazis, built a wonderful life for his family in America. And he wore a Fonzie watch. He was so proud of his son. And he kept telling Henry, tell Gary Marshall you taught water skiing at overnight camp. Tell Gary Marshall what a good water skier you are. And he did. And as Henry said in the book, the next thing I know, I'm on water skis. And he was you watch him glide in after jumping the shark. And you realize we're not in some flat lake, and we're not in Lake Whitefish in Wisconsin. We're in the ocean with big waves, and he's taking off from shore, and he's gliding up to the shore after jumping the shark, steps out of his skis, and throws his arms up in the air. He was graceful on skis.
He was, and also when that jump the shark phenomenon came out, I thought, oh my God, maybe I'll never work again. I should wear a scarf on my chest. And I was pitching a series to Disney once, and the young lady was looking at my resume and said, "Oh, you were on Happy Days," and I said, "Yes." She goes, "Oh, who? Oh God, do you have any idea who wrote Jump the Shark episode?" And I said, I did. I never got to pitch what I was going to pitch. She was so excited.
Oh my God. It just shows you that misinformation can travel around the world before the truth comes. Now, Brian,
yes.
You decided to move into directing in 91. You did Problem Child 2. What convinced you that you had the guts to be a director?
Well, before that, so I segued directly from Happy Days to launching Still the Beaver, the extension of the movie of the week that I did with Nick Abdo and other Happy Days alumni for CBS, which was the second highest rated MOW of the year. And they passed on a series, but then I thought it was over. And a young executive at Universal in the cable division, Ned Null, called me and said, let's go to breakfast, and said, I think we can sell this on cable. Cable was just beginning, and we ended up on the Disney Channel when it was still a pay outlet. And we had a tremendously successful first season. And then Universal and Disney got in a fight over theme parks in Florida, and they canceled the show. And Universal was so pissed that they kept it in production for another 13 and then sold it to Ted Turner for a then record order of 78 episodes. And it was, and so having my own show, no one could stop me from directing. And so for 5 years, I directed numerous episodes and worked on my post-production skills, which really weren't tested. And we did edit, we'd call out, do this, but we never sat in the editing rooms. We didn't spot music. We didn't spot effects. We weren't dubbing all the sound and mixing it. So Beaver allowed me to hone all those skills. And when the opportunity arose to do Problem Child 2, well, you looked at, they wanted to shoot it in Orlando, where with Beaver, we had opened their Orlando studio 2 years before that starred John Ritter, who I was under contract at 20th Century Fox at the time, and had written 2 pilots for his company, one of which starred his then girlfriend, now widow, Amy Yazbek, who was in the cast of Problem Child and Problem Child 2. Jack Warden was in the cast of Problem Child 2. I produced the Bad News Bears series with Jack Warden. And finally, they had a lot of trouble.
One of my favorite actors, by the way.
A great talent and a wonderful man. And finally, Michael Oliver. They had the Problem Child. They had a tremendous amount of problems with the family during the production of Problem Child 1. They weren't going to have problems on Problem Child 2 because Michael Oliver's older brother had portrayed the little boy who Fonzie adopted in the final 2 episodes of Happy Days that Fred and I wrote with Bickley and Warren. And we got along well and continued to get along well. And so when all those elements came together, I was, despite my inexperience, everything came together. And
I would think all that time on TV sets, all that comfort of developing it with actors, I would think that really helped you develop yourself as a feature director.
It took time to get to that point, and I was learning the entire time and working with people like Gary Marshall along the way to teach you how to really, not just to run a show, but to manage the people and what to do to keep it harmonious. Happy Days was a unique situation, and that's why we celebrated.
I can't think of a more harmonious set than Happy Days. Isn't that kind of like the weather vane for all of Hollywood?
Oh, it is. Well, as we often say, when we left that,
we had no idea.
It was a tremendous rude awakening. It's just, there's kind of some but just to go back to Brian's directing, just working with him all these years, you knew that he was destined to be an incredible director.
Now, what about you, Fred? Fred, did you ever have the tickle of a director idea with you?
That's very nice of you to ask. I did. I directed a couple little plays and one-woman shows, but I don't know. Again, it's like, why didn't I want? No, I want to write at an early age.
Well, maybe if your father had been a director too, you would have shunned that.
Also, he was a great juggler, and I didn't pursue that.
Fred, did you ever get a chance to write something with your dad?
No, I didn't. It was when I got the assignment to write the Laverne and Shirley. The day I got the assignment, my parents were on a 2-week cruise, and I had to turn the script in 2 weeks. And I would, if Dad were here, I probably would have said, "Oh my God, what am I doing, or what do I do?" But it's funny. And people have asked, if we ever worked together, or if we wanted, we never did. That would have been very interesting. And Dad wrote until he was, mid 80s and stuff. So
and nominated for an Oscar for Oh God 2.
Yeah, well, I don't think he had an Oscar, but he won some Writers Guild Awards. And it's so funny because when I did start in the business, so many times I'd run into people, they say, oh, are you Freddie Fox's kid? And I go, yeah. And they'd go, oh man, if you can be half the writer as your dad. And people would say, didn't that bother you? I'd say, oh my God, not at all. I'd rather have that, and what a jerk your dad, so, and Dad was very, very well liked. And
very funny. And a very funny man.
You guys, just being on this show with you for an hour, I can see how funny you guys are. And are you watching anything on TV today that you think is funny?
Oh boy, go ahead, Brian.
Yes, no, Bookie on Max and Hacks on Max are two of the best comedies.
Shrinking, I like
in
Shrinking.
A long time. Shrinking Wonder with Ted McGinley, who learned his comedy chops on Happy Days and would go on to do over 500 episodes of television. Happy Days hired him off of a swimsuit calendar.
Another thing about Ted, loved Happy Days. One Tuesday he's watching Happy Days. The next week he's on Happy Days, which is just my. And what about you, Steve? What do you like a
Well,
lot?
I'm searching for funny. It's funny because I try to keep track of everything. A few years ago, Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Fleabag,
Yes, Fleabag,
darling.
wonderful, wonderful
Yeah,
Yeah.
show.
I didn't laugh once. I'm sorry.
Really, I like
I'm a
Fleabag.
big, and by the way, I'm a big laugher. I'm a big laugher, and I didn't laugh. But there's a different style of comedy. It's very character driven. It's not really based on jokes. I
No,
guess I'm
no.
more of a, I like language too. I think language comedy is a lot of fun. Early Woody
Right.
Allen is very dear to me. Uh,
Yeah.
guys, this has been just a lot of fun. What are you guys doing? I mean, you got the books out, obviously, and we'll mention the title again to the folks.
And at a new low price on Amazon. So take advantage of that. It doesn't. I mean, we may be ordering from them because it may be cheaper than having them shipped from the publisher.
Yeah, here it is. Okay, so the title of the book is 50 Years of Happy Days, a visual history of an American television classic. That
Yes. No, we wanted a longer title.
is it hardcover or soft cover?
Hardcover. It's a beautiful book. Over 700, I believe, photos. I would say 85% have never been seen publicly. And we talked about Paramount very briefly in our affiliation with them. We figured we'd have 20,000 photos to go through. They had less than 300 in their digital and physical archive. And so 90% of the photos in the book came from Jerry Paris's kids, from all the photos he collected, from Henry, from Ron, from Anson, from Donnie, from Scott Baio, from Marion Ross, and
Yes,
yeah,
and we
in
had
our own
some, which
collection.
is fun.
Yes.
Now, in compiling the book, did you get cooperation from everybody, or did somebody not want to?
Even those who have passed allowed us to use their images, and
Yeah, and
it's still a great team. It's a
true.
wonderful group of people, and still loyal to each other. And their support of this book was remarkable and
And
welcomed.
their interviews just added so much to the book. It was
Yeah.
we found out things that we didn't know, and they were just incredible.
Yeah, no,
What do you, what do you guys?
the cast, and the produced Lowell Gans, William S. Bickley, the surviving Arthur Silver. They added so much to the book.
So, what are you guys working on these days? Brian, you go first.
Well, working on two more books that it's too early to talk about, and I gotta write some of them. Giving the keynote address at my alma mater's fine arts graduation in 2 months. I love having a deadline. But in the words of the University of New Mexico, and
Are those Gauchos? Are those Gauchos?
no, that's the Lobos.
Oh, that's
The Lobos. I believe San Diego State's the Gauchos.
Oh, very
So-
good.
So,
What about you, Fred? What are you working on, Fred?
gosh, years ago, I had the pleasure of working on a children's book with Ray Bradbury, and he passed away before he got it published. And I'm kind of upset with myself. I haven't got it, so I'd like to kind of revisit that and get that done.
Here.
Well,
Yeah,
everyone, you have been listening and watching Saturday Night the Movies, except tonight it's Saturday night.
It's Tuesday night at 8 on ABC.
It's a Tuesday night at 8. It's Happy Days again with Fred Fox Jr. and Brian Levant. Not Brian Levant, it's Levant.
That's right.
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in to everyone. If you like what you're listening, give us a thumbs up, write us a note, give us 5 stars, whatever you can do to advance the popularity of this wonderful show that's now 2.5 years old. Fred and Brian, just thank you so much for joining me for a fun night.
Thanks so
Okay.
much. It was a lot of fun.
All
Thank you.
right. Now I can find out what happened at the Lakers game. All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, stay